I paid off my parents' $180,000 mortgage so they could finally retire. When I showed up to surprise them on their 40th anniversary, my brother-in-law was standing in the kitchen holding a beer, telling my father to get out of his own house. My name is Hannah. I'm 32. I'm a registered nurse working in a cardiac unit in Vancouver, and I am the oldest of 2 children. My sister's name is Diane. She is 29. And for most of our lives, those 2 facts, that I was older and that I was a nurse, were treated like a moral obligation. Like I owed the family something simply for existing in it first and for choosing a career that happened to pay. I want to tell you what happened. All of it. Because if you've ever felt like the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who just handles things while someone else in the family gets to fall apart loudly and be caught every single time, this is for you. Like and subscribe before I start, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Okay, here we go. My parents came to Canada from the Philippines in the late 80s. My father, who I'll call Dad, worked in a warehouse in Burnaby for 22 years. My mother, who I'll call Mom, cleaned houses, not part-time, full-time, 5 days a week, sometimes 6. She wore rubber gloves that left white creases on her hands. She came home smelling like bleach and lavender, and she would still make dinner. She never complained about it. Not once. Not in front of us. We grew up in a townhouse in Surrey. It wasn't falling apart, but it wasn't comfortable either. I learned very early what the sound of the mail slot meant. A soft thud was fine. A heavier thud, the kind that meant more than one envelope, was not fine. I would get to the door first sometimes. I would hold the envelopes and sort them before my parents got home from work. I knew what the ones from BC Hydro meant. I knew what the ones from the bank meant. I was 9 years old and I had already developed a kind of background anxiety that never fully went away. It just became part of how I moved through the world. Alert. Ready. Managing. My sister Diane was different. She was louder, more emotional, more creative. She felt things deeply, or at least, that's what we were told. When she cried, my parents stopped what they were doing. When I was upset, I was reminded that I was the steady one. "You're stronger than her," my mother would say to me, quietly, like it was a compliment. I understood, even then, that it wasn't. It was a transfer. My needs were being moved off the table to make room for hers. I don't think my parents are bad people. I want to say that clearly. They worked themselves into the ground for us. They just also built a system where one child was the emotional center of the family and the other was the load-bearing wall. Walls don't get thanked. They just hold things up. I put myself through nursing school with a combination of student loans, bursaries, and a part-time job at a grocery store in Coquitlam, where I worked evening shifts after class. I didn't go to parties in my 20s. I didn't travel. I had a bachelor's at 23. I started on the cardiac unit at 24, and by the time I was 26, I had paid off my own student loans and started quietly putting money away. Diane took a different path. She moved to Toronto with her boyfriend, a man I'll call my brother-in-law. They got engaged 2 years in. The wedding was a production. My parents put $15,000 on a credit card they couldn't afford to fill for it. I paid for my own flight, my own hotel, and also, quietly, the flowers. Because Diane called me the week before and said the florist was demanding full payment and she didn't have it, and did I have anything I could lend her? Just for now. Just until they got back from the honeymoon. There was no paying it back. There never was. I knew it when I sent the transfer. The calls became a pattern. My brother-in-law worked in real estate sales, or he was going to, or he had been, or he was between things. The exact nature of his employment was always slightly out of focus. What was never out of focus was the need. Diane needed help with their car insurance. They were 3 months behind on rent. Could I put something toward her dental? She hadn't been in 2 years, and there was a lot going on. I said yes every time, not because I didn't see what was happening, but because she was my sister, and she had children, and the children weren't responsible for their parents' choices. I tracked it eventually. Not obsessively, just honestly. In 4 years, I had sent Diane and my brother-in-law somewhere between $22,000 and $25,000. I say between because some of it was cash at Christmas, some of it was paying for things directly, and some of it was Interact transfers she'd asked me to delete the notification for, because she didn't want my brother-in-law to feel bad. I deleted them. I don't know why I did that. I think I was still, at 29, the 9-year-old girl hiding the envelopes. The thing that changed everything for me was a Tuesday afternoon visit to my parents' house. I had driven out to Surrey to drop off some groceries. Nothing big. Just things I picked up because I knew my dad's blood pressure medication had gone up in cost, and I wanted to make sure the grocery budget wasn't being stretched. My mom answered the door, and she looked tired in a way that was different from her regular tired. This was a tired that had settled into her face. She was 62 years old, and she still had 3 years left on the mortgage. I sat down at the kitchen table, and she made tea, and for a few minutes we just sat there. Then she opened the drawer where she keeps the mail, and she put a piece of paper on the table in front of me, without saying anything. It was a notice from the mortgage company, not a default notice, just a regular reminder that the balance was still over $180,000. They'd been paying it for over 20 years. My father was 64, his knees were getting bad. He was supposed to retire in a year, and they would have 3 more years of payments after that. I looked at my mother. She looked at the table. I drove home on the Trans-Canada with my hands tight on the wheel, and I thought about the $22,000 I had sent to Diane's household over the past 4 years. And I thought about the fact that my parents had never asked me for a single cent. I made my decision somewhere around Langley. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents. Not any of my friends. Not Diane. I contacted a mortgage broker I trusted, looked at what a lump sum payment would actually do to the remaining balance, and then I spent the next 8 months doing the math. I picked up overtime shifts. I cut everything I could cut. I cashed out an RRSP I'd been contributing to, took the tax hit, and I made the payment directly to the lender. I cleared the mortgage. I planned the reveal around their 40th anniversary, which was in September. I told my parents I was taking them out for a special dinner. Mom said it was too much, the drive, the cost. What about the parking? I told her I had a reservation and to wear something nice. The dinner was real. I took them to a restaurant on the water in White Rock. We had halibut and a bottle of white wine my mother kept saying was too expensive. After dessert, I put an envelope on the table. Just a white envelope. My dad picked it up. His hands, which had spent decades lifting warehouse boxes, and then, in his last years, doing logistics from a chair that was too small for him, were thick-knuckled and careful with the envelope. He opened it slowly. Inside was a letter from the mortgage company confirming the balance was 0 and the property was fully theirs. My mother didn't understand it at first. She read it twice. Then she looked at me. Then she started to cry. My father put the letter down on the table very gently, like it might break. He looked at the window. The water outside was dark. He said, "That's our house." Just that. "That's our house." "Yeah, Dad. It's your house. No more payments." He put his face in his hands and stayed there for a long time. We sat on the patio when we got back to their place that night. Mom made tea. Dad didn't say much. He just kept touching the edge of the letter, which he'd folded and put in his shirt pocket. The nights in Surrey in September are cool and close, and the street was quiet, and I remember thinking I had never felt so certain that I had done the right thing. That feeling lasted 11 days. On the 12th day, I got a call from my mother. I was finishing a night shift, and I had that particular hospital fluorescent haze over everything. My phone buzzed in my locker, and I saw Mom and I answered it assuming something was wrong with my dad's health. There was a pause, the long kind. "Your sister called," she said. My stomach dropped. I leaned against the locker. She heard about the mortgage. I don't know how. Maybe your Aunt Cora. She's excited for us. She wants to come celebrate. She's going to bring the kids out for Thanksgiving weekend. Mom, I started. It's just a weekend, Olivia. She caught herself. I mean, Hannah, it's just a visit. She's your sister. I know who she is, I said. She'll be here Thursday. I stood in the locker room for a few minutes after I hung up. The fluorescent light buzzed. Someone's sneakers squeaked past in the hallway. I knew with the particular clarity that comes with sleep deprivation and pattern recognition that this was not going to be just a weekend. I had spent 4 years watching Diane's just for a little while turn into something else entirely. I knew the shape of it. I called my dad that evening. He sounded tired. Are you okay with them coming? I asked. A pause. Yeah, it'll be fine. She's excited. You know how she is. I do, I said. I know exactly how she is. He didn't say anything to that. Diane and my brother-in-law arrived on the Thursday before Thanksgiving. They brought both kids, the dog, and 4 large duffel bags for what was supposed to be a 4-day visit. My brother-in-law drove. He pulled the SUV, newer than anything I had ever driven, into my parents' driveway and got out without turning off the radio. He stood in the driveway, stretching and looking at the house the way you look at a property you're assessing. I heard about this from my dad later. I wasn't there yet. I was finishing a shift. I drove out Saturday morning. I had taken Monday off so I could stay for the long weekend. I brought a pie from a bakery in Burnaby that my mother loves, butter tarts, and a 6-pack of the pale ale my dad drinks on weekends. I was in a good mood. I thought, maybe this would be fine. Maybe Diane was just coming to celebrate. Maybe I was being uncharitable. I pulled onto my parents' street and I could hear the music from half a block away. The front yard had toys in it, not neatly, scattered. A pool noodle. A pair of child sneakers that had been left on the lawn. My mother's small flower bed near the front step had a soccer ball sitting in the middle of it. The front door was open. I sat in the car for a moment. Then I picked up my pie and my butter tarts and I went inside. The kitchen smelled like stale beer and reheated fast food. My mother was at the counter with her back to me. Her shoulders were held up near her ears. She was washing dishes that were already clean. I could tell because she does that when she's anxious. She finds something physical and repetitive to do with her hands. My father was sitting at the kitchen table. He was not reading, not drinking coffee, not doing the crossword he does every morning. He was just sitting there with his hands on the table looking at a spot on the wall. He looked like a man in a waiting room. My brother-in-law was in the living room. He was on the phone, feet up on the coffee table, wearing what I recognized as the fleece zip-up my dad keeps by the back door. The good one. The one my dad wears to the garden. He didn't look up when I walked in. Diane was not visible. The kids were running in the hallway, the older one sliding on the hardwood in his socks, the younger one screaming in the specific way children scream when they're overstimulated and no one is managing it. My mother turned around. Her face when she saw me was a complicated thing. Relief, embarrassment, and something else. Something preemptive. Like she already knew what I was going to say, and was already asking me not to say it. Then my brother-in-law looked up from his phone. He saw me. He gave me the kind of nod that men give when they're trying to establish that they're comfortable, and you're the one intruding. Hey, he said. Hannah, right? Good timing. We were just talking about the deck out back. You think that railing is up to code? Because if you're going to have people over, you'd want to look at that. I set the pie down on the counter. My dad looked at me. In his eyes, I saw the same thing I had always seen, the same thing I saw in that restaurant when he put his face in his hands over the mortgage letter. Shame. Not at me. At himself. At the fact that he was 64 years old and sitting at his own kitchen table feeling like a guest. Where's Diane? I said. She's resting. My mother said quickly. She had a long drive. They live 4 hours away, I said. She's been tired. I looked at the fleece on my brother-in-law's back. I looked at the shoes on the floor, 6 pairs of them blocking the hallway. I looked at my father's hands. They were shaking slightly, the way they do when his blood pressure is up. I said, I'm going to put the kettle on. Dad, do you want to come sit outside with me? He stood up. He was relieved. I could see it in the way he moved. We sat on the back step. It was cool out. The maple in the back corner had gone orange. My dad wrapped his hands around his mug. How long have they been here? I asked. Since Thursday, he said. I thought it was Thanksgiving weekend, I said. Yeah. He looked at the maple tree. The oldest one, your nephew. He's a good kid. He's no trouble. It's just, he stopped. I waited. Your brother-in-law. He made a comment. Yesterday, he said. He stopped again. Then he said it quietly. He told me this house was an asset now, and we should be thinking about how to make it work for us. I looked at my dad. He said it like it was helpful. My dad said. Like he was doing me a favor. He had this whole plan. Short-term rental, through the summer. We'd stay, but in the basement. And they'd manage it, take a cut for the work. For the management. I put my hand on my father's arm. I'm going to take care of this, I said. He shook his head. Don't make trouble, Hannah. Your sister gets... Dad, I said. I paid off your house so you could retire in it, not so it could become someone else's income property. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I know, that was enough. I had not come to Surrey unprepared. I want to be clear about that. I had spent the past 11 days in a state of cautious optimism, but I am, at the end of the day, a cardiac nurse. I am trained to anticipate deterioration. I know the difference between a patient who is stable and a patient who is stable for now. I had watched Diane and my brother-in-law's pattern for 4 years. I knew what just a visit meant. So before I drove out that morning, I had made 2 phone calls and sent 1 email. I went back inside. My brother-in-law was still on the sofa. Diane had appeared. She was at the kitchen table with a coffee, scrolling her phone. She looked up when I came in and her face did a thing. It always does. It arranged itself into warmth that didn't quite reach her eyes. It's the face she uses when she needs something. Hey, she said. You made it. I've been here, I said. I was out back with Dad. She glanced at the back door. Everything okay? Everything's fine, I said. Can I talk to both of you? My brother-in-law made a performance of setting his phone down. My mother stood very still at the counter. I pulled a chair out from the kitchen table and sat down. I am really glad you came out for Thanksgiving, I said. It's nice that we're all together, and I want to make sure we're on the same page about a few things while you're here. My brother-in-law leaned back on the sofa. Sure, he said. The word carried a weight that said he thought this conversation was going to go in his favor. I put 2 pieces of paper on the table. The first one is the property title, I said. I pointed to my parents' names. This is whose house this is. Not mine. Theirs. I am not on this title. I don't own this house. I made a financial gift that cleared the mortgage. The house belongs to my parents. Diane looked at the paper. Okay, she said slowly. The second document, I said, is something I had prepared when I arranged the mortgage payoff. It's a family loan agreement that I had witnessed and signed by both Mom and Dad at the time of the payment. It documents the nature of the gift and includes a clause confirming that neither of them can enter into any rental, commercial, or income-generating agreement involving this property without independent legal advice and a 30-day notice period. My brother-in-law sat up straighter. That's not, he said. You can't just, that's not a real thing. They own the house. They can do what they want with it. They can, I said. And what they want to do is live in it. Quietly. Without a property management arrangement. He looked at Diane. Diane looked at me. Where is this coming from? She said. Her voice had shifted. The warmth was gone. This is our parents' house, Hannah. We're family. I just thought I know what you thought, I said. I found the listing. I put my phone on the table. I had a screenshot of an Airbnb listing, a draft that her account had left visible because she hadn't realized the privacy setting didn't apply to shared household logins on the family iPad my parents kept on the counter. The photos were of my parents' house. The bedroom with the quilt my mother made, the kitchen with the window my mother loved. The listing title was Cozy Family Home, Surrey, BC, close to Parks and Transit. She had uploaded it 2 days after she arrived. The price was $175 a night. Diane's face went very still. That's not, she started. That's just an idea I was. Mom, I said. I looked at my mother. Can you come sit down? My mother sat down at the table. She looked at the listing on my phone. She looked at the photo of her own bedroom. She didn't say anything. She just closed her eyes. My brother-in-law tried a different approach then. He stood up. He was taller than me, and he knew it, and he positioned himself that way, by the entryway, slightly blocking it. You paid off a mortgage, he said. Great. That's a generous thing. But that doesn't give you the right to control what they do with their own property. You're not their parent. You made a gift. Gifts don't come with strings. He was right that gifts don't usually come with strings. But he wasn't right about what this was. It's not a string, I said. It's a documented agreement signed by the people who own this property, stating their intention for how it will be used. If you want to challenge it, you're welcome to get a lawyer and look into your options. But I'd remind you that any lawyer you consult will also tell you that running an unlicensed short-term rental in a residential zone in Surrey is a bylaw violation, and that listing a property you don't own on a rental platform without the knowledge of the actual owners is a form of fraud. He started to say something. I kept going. I also spoke this morning with the family lawyer. My parents have used the same one for 15 years, and she has a copy of the agreement. She's available Monday if you'd like to call her. He stopped. The kids had gone quiet somewhere in the hallway. The older one, my nephew, was standing near the door to the kitchen. He was watching. His face was careful, the way children's faces get when they've learned to read the room. I looked at my sister. Her eyes were filling up. I knew this move. I had watched it my whole life. The tears were real, but the timing was strategic. They arrived when the argument wasn't going her way. Hannah, she said. Her voice cracked on purpose. We have nowhere, we're struggling. You have no idea what things have been like. We just needed a break. We thought maybe if we could stay a few weeks and get the rental going, we could put a little money together. We'd give Mom and Dad a cut. It wasn't meant to hurt anyone. A few weeks, I said. Not a weekend. She looked at the table. I looked at my parents. My dad was still at the back door, leaning against the frame. My mom had her hands flat on the table. Mom, I said quietly, I'm going to need you to tell me what you want. Not what's polite. Not what keeps the peace. What you actually want. She looked at Diane. She looked at Diane. She looked at my brother-in-law. She looked at the photo of her own bedroom on my phone screen. I want my house back, she said. Her voice was almost nothing. But it was there. I want my house back. That was the sentence I had been waiting my whole life to hear her say. My brother-in-law took a breath and started in about rights and tenancy law, and how they've been here 5 days, which was long enough to establish occupancy. I let him talk. He ran out of steam around the part where he mentioned a human rights complaint, which was when I picked up my phone and showed him a text thread. The person I had texted that morning before driving out was a friend of mine, a woman who works as a bylaw enforcement officer with the city of Surrey. I'd explained the situation in general terms. She had explained to me in equally general terms what an unauthorized short-term rental complaint investigation looked like, the timeline involved, and the fact that the complaint would be tied to the listing which was now screenshotted and documented. I said, have a call scheduled with Airbnb's trust and safety team for Monday morning. The listing is already flagged. The air in the kitchen went flat. The packing took 2 hours. It was not quiet. Diane cried, the loud kind, the kind designed to be heard. My brother-in-law made remarks about what kind of person does this to family, what kind of sister, what their kids were going to remember about this day. The younger child picked up on the distress and screamed through most of it. The dog knocked over the recycling bin. My nephew, the older one, packed his own bag. He folded his things. He didn't look at his parents while he did it. He looked at me once, briefly, and I held his gaze and tried to put something into it, that this was not about him, that he was going to be okay, and then he looked away and finished zipping his bag. My brother-in-law, on the way out the door, turned around and pointed at my parents. "You're choosing her over your own daughter," he said. "You'll regret this." My dad looked at him. My father, who had worked in a warehouse for 22 years and who had never once in my memory raised his voice, looked at my brother-in-law and said quietly, "I think you should go now." My brother-in-law went. After the car pulled away, I stood in the front doorway. The street was quiet. The maple a few doors down had gone full orange. It was a Thanksgiving weekend in Surrey, British Columbia, and the air smelled like cold leaves and someone's fireplace a few streets over. My mother started picking the soccer ball out of her flower bed. I helped her. We didn't say much. My dad came out, and we all three of us stood there in the front yard for a moment, just standing there, in the cool October air. Then my mother said, "I need to make something. Let's go inside and I'll make something." She made arroz caldo. She made enough for 6 people even though there were only 3 of us. She put it in the big pot my grandmother brought from Manila, and the whole house started to smell like ginger and garlic and something I did not have a word for except home. We ate at the kitchen table, the 3 of us, and my dad had his pale ale, and we watched the evening news and argued about the weather forecast. The way we always do, whether the rain they're predicting is going to materialize or whether, as my dad always insists, the forecast people have never once been right about anything. My phone buzzed all evening. Texts from relatives I hadn't spoken to in months. My mother's sister, a cousin I barely knew. They had the story half right and the emotions fully loaded. I read them and put my phone face down. Diane's version of events appeared on social media within 48 hours. I didn't engage with it. My mother saw it and was quiet for a day, and then she made more food, and then she was okay. The legal threat from my brother-in-law arrived by email 2 weeks later. It was addressed to me and CC'd a Gmail account that appeared to belong to a paralegal service, the kind you find advertised on a bus shelter. I forwarded it to the family lawyer, who replied to them directly with a 4-sentence letter. I never heard from them again about it. Diane and I have not spoken since Thanksgiving. I don't know what that looks like going forward. I know what I'm willing to do and what I'm not, and I know that those limits are something I had to find the hard way, through years of transfers and deleted notifications and birthday money I sent, that paid for things I never knew about. I drove out to Surrey a few weeks ago. I didn't call first. I just drove out on a Saturday morning and knocked. My dad answered the door. He was in his garden clothes. He had been out back, doing something with the flower bed, replanting the thing Diane's soccer ball had wrecked. He looked at me and stepped back and held the door open. My mother was in the kitchen. She was on the phone with someone, laughing, the real kind. She waved at me and kept talking. I sat down at the kitchen table, and my dad put the kettle on, and for a while we just sat in the kitchen, the 2 of us, while the kettle heated up, and my mother laughed in the other room, and somewhere outside a crow was doing the thing crows do in October, making too much noise about nothing in particular. My dad put a cup of tea in front of me and sat down across the table. He reached into his shirt pocket and put something on the table between us. It was the mortgage letter, the one from the lender. The one confirming the balance was 0. He'd folded it so many times it was going soft at the creases. He smoothed it out a little with his thumb. "I carry it," he said. He didn't say why. He didn't have to. The house was quiet. The tea was hot. The tea was hot. Outside, the leaves were nearly all down. Inside, everything that was supposed to hold was holding.